Well, last week, as we continue in our Ephesians series, I said that if any ancient word needs to be heard today, the message of Ephesians 4 is it. I pointed to the extreme divisiveness and polarization that seemingly impacts our lives at every level, including our most intimate relationships. And I said that after making the case for our relatedness as siblings in the family of God, fully accepted, fully adopted, complete heirs of the salvation of God revealed in Jesus in the preceding 3 chapters of this ancient letter, the Apostle Paul began teaching the first century followers of Jesus to be one in the Spirit and to reject discord and dissension, to seek in humility to live out the calling that we are worthy of receiving as his disciples. As a result, the letter says, we aren't supposed to be infants any longer, who can be tossed and blown around by every wind that comes from teaching with deceitful scheming and the tricks people play to deliberately mislead others. Frank Abagnale Jr., portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio in the 2002 film Catch Me If You Can, was one of 7 children and spent the first 16 years of his life in Bronxville, New York. This is a true story. His French mother, Paulette, and father, Frank Abagnale Sr., divorced when he was 16. At the divorce hearing, Abagnale ran away never to see his father again. He had an extremely high IQ. He had a nearly photographic memory. He was a con artist, a confidence trickster, a forger, and an impersonator. By 21 years of age, he had forged $2.5 million in checks in 26 countries. He had flown over 1 million miles impersonating a Pan Am pilot. Makes you think about recent news stories, right? He impersonated a professor and taught a class at Brigham Young University. He impersonated a pediatrician, and he was named head of a clinic in a town in Georgia. He impersonated a Harvard law student and passed the Louisiana bar exam and worked in the Attorney General's office in Louisiana. Frank Abagnale Jr. He escaped arrest on several occasions and was pursued by the FBI till his capture in France. He was extradited to the United States, where he escaped as his plane landed at night. Eventually, he was captured again. He posed as a prison inspector and escaped once more before being captured and placed in solitary confinement. Then, I think because they figured out they're never going to keep this guy in jail, the FBI decided to hire him instead and hired him to solve bank fraud and IRS cases, and he began his own security consultation company for the financial industry. Frank Abagnale was a master of deceit who turned his life around to serve the common good. To serve the common good. And while we would say that his story is extreme, it brings to light our human propensity for deception of ourselves and others, our capacity for redemption, and our ability to do the most good despite our failures or past mistakes. So then, putting away all falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. The apostle reminds us that happy families, trusted friendships, and partnerships, satisfied marriages, fulfilled relationships, that community begins with honesty in our communication with one another. Fidelity or trust is a direct result of dealing honestly with one another. It's simple, right? A childlike value we learn when we encounter the 10 Commandments for the first time. Thou shalt not lie. Or maybe it's something we learn as we pledge our Scout's honor. To be truthful, to not lie to one another. And then we are lied to. We are lied to by our friends, by our siblings, by our parents. We're lied to by our neighbors. We're lied to by our church friends, and possibly even our pastors. Oh, they may begin as simple untruths, myths about holiday figures and such, and eventually exaggerations and hyperbole, all in good fun, or eventually just business, my friend. Just business. We become cynical about truth, even to the point of following conspiracy theories driven by the power of the internet. It used to be the tabloids at the checkout counter, or tabloid news shows and the like. And soon the game of how long can you go before getting caught in your own web of lies is the definition of a successful politician. Paul knew that community, the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, that peaceful community, is the result of speaking the truth with love, having honor for the other, which means doing our best to understand how what we say is being received by another person. How what we say is being received by another person. And that means we have to set our own agenda aside, however right we think we are, to respect the opinions, the values, and beliefs of the other person. That our very words are molded and shaped by grace. By grace. No one in the early Christian community was perfect at speaking the truth in love. Not Paul, not any of the followers of Jesus, and no one is today. No one is today. But that doesn't mean that we can abdicate our responsibility to do our best to be encouragers, building up rather than tearing down one another. Dishonesty is the primary source of the dissension, the discord, the division, the anger and hatred that plagues and threatens our communities with destruction today. In our politics, our churches, and even our families, deceptions and lying to one another tears apart our common bonds and destroys our ability to trust in anyone or anything. We can't trust anymore. And that was exactly what Paul was warning the ancient Ephesians to avoid. Conflict was unavoidable. When any group of people try to live and work together, cousin conflict is just down the hallway, waiting to be called into the kitchen and wreak havoc at a moment's notice. Conflict is not evil. It can actually be the catalyst to progress. Ask any inventor. Conflict left unresolved, or conflict that inflicts lasting wounds, is unhealthy at the least and evil at its worst. Put away from you all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ has forgiven you. Conflict that arises between people who trust each other has the potential of being resolved, and the root is usually some form of forgiveness, of one party admitting they're wrong or that they acted wrongly, and the other party letting go of any hurt or pride in their being right. That's right. Resolving conflict often includes letting go of our selfish needs to focus on the healing or redemption of the other. And most importantly, don't let the sun go down on your anger. In other words, do not hold grudges. Do not carry past hurts and anger around with you like dead weight. It will do you no good. It will do the community no good. I've met far too many people in my nearly 30 years of ministry who carry awful burdens of unresolved conflicts from their past. Personal conflicts, family conflicts, work conflicts, and even conflicts with God, all of which adversely impacted their health, their physical health, and their mental health, and in too many cases may have even limited their longevity. We say of such persons when they leave this life, rest in peace. And we say that as if peace is impossible in this life. Perhaps that's true for some folks. For whatever reason, chemical imbalance in their makeup as a human being, traumatic experiences that haunt them day after day, genetic and environmental disorders that lead to excessive anxiety or social maladies. And while some individuals may seem incapable of finding peace in this life, they may be the ones who need the presence of God's peacemakers the most. They may be the ones who need the presence of God's peacemakers the most. As beloved children of God, we are God's peacemakers. We, you and me, are God's peacemakers. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." For the Apostle Paul, everyone who comes to know the love and grace of God made known in Jesus are children of God, and thus called to be peacemakers. As one commentator I read this week said, working for peace isn't optional for Christians. And yet sometimes we seem to be the most negative, hostile, and unloving people around, stirring up and perpetuating conflicts rather than resolving them. It only takes a quick browsing of Facebook comment threads and online articles, sadly, to prove the point in a heartbeat. But that's because we choose dishonesty over speaking the truth in love. We choose to hold on to our anger and refuse to forgive, or worse, we seek vengeance. We choose to be hard-hearted rather than be filled with humility, with gentleness, with patience, and compassion for one another. Our society values competition, the desire to be the best, to have the most, to be a winner, and too often our ethics are shaped and molded by whatever it takes to win and win big. In Christ, there are no winners, nor are there any losers. All are full heirs of God's salvation. The world values retribution, the desire to right a wrong with another wrong, to take a life for a life. In Christ, justice is restorative, reconciling us to God and to one another, restoring our relationships once thought to be broken or lost forever. Humanity, in our immaturity, believes that peacemaking is the result of having the biggest weapon or by elimination of perceived threats. In Christ, my friends, we are called to be peacemakers. So let us choose. Let us choose to be peacemakers, for then we will be known as children of God. Amen.